Welcome to NinonSpeaks. I'm your host, Ninon de Rosa, and my co-host is AJ Dean. Sit back and enjoy the show. Welcome to NinonSpeaks. I'm Ninon de Rosa, and of course I have my co-host and producer right next to me, and of course that's AJ Dean. We have a fabulous guest, but as you all know, I never know too much about my guests. I never pre-interview them. I like it to be, as I call it, off the cuff. So we're going to go off the cuff, and I'm going to pass you over to AJ because she's going to introduce our guest.
Thank you so much, Ninon. We have an amazing and fabulous show today with the international legendary burlesque photographer himself, Neil Kendall, and our friend. We love him so much. He is a burlesque photographer and also a director and producer of burlesque events, and he's got lots of fun things to talk to us about. Hello and welcome, our favorite Neil.
Oh, hello to you both, and love from England as we continue to come out of lockdown.
This is kind of good. Yeah, good old England. Now, I just need to know, what part of England are you in at the moment?
Now, right now, I am up in Chester, in the northwest of the country.
Chester, I know Chester very well. I'm from Torquay.
Oh, wow. So way down in Devon.
Yeah, you're one end and I'm down the other end.
Really? Yeah, that is a drive, Ninon.
Yeah, that's a 3 or 4 hour drive at least.
It is. Yeah.
Now, what's your weather like? Are you hot, cold, or what's your temperature?
Oh, it is the typical British summer. It's managing to be cloudy, slightly rainy, yet incredibly humid at the same time. So, yeah.
Well, we're longing for that. I'm in Vegas. And Vegas is about 110 now. It is humid, and it's getting ready to have a big thunderstorm. So it's not really the greatest weather in the world. So we stay home.
Absolutely.
Now you have a fascinating career that you built up, obviously from a very young age. When did you start doing photography and sort of getting into the burlesque?
You know, I had this lovely experience where my grandfather bought me a little OM10 camera. And it's funny, isn't it? Because no one in my family is remotely creative or artistic. And it's so odd the way you suddenly, you know, it was like coming home, this little camera. I put my little roll of Kodak film in it.
Kodak.
Boom, I was away, Ninon. It was like love at first sight. So
yeah, I can imagine that. So you're the only one kind of in your family in the entertainment business, but a funny thing, so am I. I'm the only one that I call myself the black sheep of the family, though I'm probably white as white can be, coming from good old England. But it's funny how you get that one person that kind of trails off somewhere, and you and I did it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's in your DNA, right? I think that whether it's performance or being a creative, I just think you're born with that desire to make something. It's funny.
I think you're absolutely right. So you started, I thought you were going to say you had a brownie camera. Remember the little tiny brownie camera?
I'm not quite that old, but yes, I do remember them. Yeah.
And the Kodak, obviously the Kodak film. I can remember my mother. She didn't have a brownie. My mother always took photographs for years. Well. So in your career, you started out, what did you start out actually taking photographs of?
You know, this is funny. I was doing my degree and I started off actually making these crazy little movies and things. I was always obsessed. You know, those amazing old B movies with people like Jane Mansfield in them, like thrillers. And, you know, so I was, as a student, you know, when I should have been studying, I was running around making, you know, Swamp Women from Mars or whatever it was. I just had this love of old film, and that translated to my portraits. And it's funny because I'm talking like the late 80s, you know, so none of my friends were doing anything like that, but of course got roped into everything I was doing, right? So they'd be like prehistoric women, or, you know, the Wild Women of Wong, or whatever it might be. But there was always this heightened theatricality about it, which still, I have to say, I'm still doing that now at like 37 years later, whatever it is.
You're fascinated by the older part of filming, actually, right?
Yeah, I'm just fascinated. You know, when we go back to like old Hollywood and you look at those incredible people like Marlene Dietrich, or oh my gosh, you know, there's that inherent glamour. I think it's nothing
funny you
other than
should,
that, right?
funny
That
you
we
should,
love.
yeah, funny you should mention Marlene Dietrich. There's the photograph I happen to have of her, signed photographs given to me from her. And somebody, I did not do it, so I'm not going to take claim of meeting her.
Yeah.
But I knew somebody, and they said, "Oh, would you like?" And I said, "I'd love a photograph, a signed photograph of her," because I always admired her because she was such a forward woman. But a lot of those women in those days were very forward and very sort of out there, and sort of, you know, they allowed themselves to be what they wanted to be as a woman. And then those days it was hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the things I have to say I love about burlesque is that, you know, historically as it is today, I think there's a lot of trailblazers in there that cut against what was expected of society. And I can only imagine being Joan Crawford or Bette Davis in the 30s in that old male-driven studio system, how hard that was to fight that, right? And to kind of fight for the roles you wanted and for the equal respect and everything. And still, you know, it's still an issue now, as we know. You know,
it's still an issue, but I don't think it didn't seem to be such an issue in those days. They seemed to, in those days, the producers, directors, executive producers, they seemed to turn around and say, "I want this woman to do this," and that's what happened. Whereas today, it's more of a little bit of a fight of who gets the role and her, you know. But it was a more definite, maybe because they didn't have as many, you know, women in the business. And
yeah, absolutely.
So burlesque.
Burlesque, go ahead, sure.
Now, burlesque, you got into burlesque. Now, you have to be one of the luckiest men in the entire world. And I don't know how old you started taking photographs of burlesque, but that's pretty cool.
I got into burlesque. Now, I don't know if I've told you this story before, but it's always worth repeating. I got into burlesque. I ended up going to the Mojave Desert to what is now the Burlesque Hall of Fame. At that time, it was Exotic World. So I met Jenny Lee, the Bazoom girl, the girl with a 44-inch personality is how she was billed. So you can only imagine at 64, you know what I mean? That
I can imagine
what I came face to face with as a 21-year-old. But I met her and the amazing Dixie Evans, who'd been the Marilyn Monroe of burlesque. So
absolutely.
I ended up going to this amazing colony of these women out in the Mojave Desert. And so I'm with you with 110 degrees. It was so hot. And these incredible, you literally peep your horn 3 times at the end of this long, dusty track, really, to go to Exotic World. And Dixie came out in, I mean, this is a vision. She came out in like a leopard skin pantsuit, you know, looking every inch like a slightly older Marilyn Monroe. And then she gave this tour of Exotic World, all these rooms with all the burlesque paraphernalia on the walls and everything. And, you know, and she was such a character. I mean, we kind of were friends till she died. And Dixie would take you through the museum and she'd be like, "And in this room, of course, I was the Marilyn Monroe of burlesque." Now she was talking like there was 50 people behind me near on. It's just me, one person on a tour. And with a heel, she'd kick a rope light that go flashing on and off around a portrait of I don't know, Blaze Star or whoever it was, but it was like the funnest induction into burlesque. And it was completely irresistible. It was amazing.
Yeah, how old were you when all this happened?
Now, I was 21. I had just sort of graduated, and I had this crazy hitchhiking from Niagara Falls right through to New Orleans and then up kind of heading back west. And so, yeah, it was quite the trip. And this, I have to say, all these years later on, I've still got the photos of them. And that was the cherry on the cake, going to Exotic World.
Now, when you met this American Marilyn Monroe, and, you know, it's funny because they always seem to have had that very heavy voice and that very a different voice, not really a delicate woman's voice, but they had this rather rough voice. I often wonder why they did that. They were kind of, you know, this is what I do and this is who I am and I can prove it. It was amazing how they conducted themselves.
Yeah, it's nightclub people. Like, honestly, they must have spent their whole careers in dusty, smoke-filled auditoriums and, you know, with the comics backstage and the stagehands and, you know, the monkeys running around and all these crazy things that happen in the burlesque show. So I honestly think, I mean, we're in a far more health-conscious sort of generation now, but you're right. You know, these women all, I mean, Satan's Angel, all of them had like a
Raspy,
Georgette,
raspy
they've got
voice.
a raspiness.
Yes, the raspy voice of sort of trying to be heard and trying to be seen. And you could really see these women because they had figures on them that wouldn't quit. I mean, how did you manage all that? I mean, you must have been like, whoa, 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 hang on a second. I am
honestly,
human, I am a man.
Well, it just amazes me because this is that time of, I mentioned Jane Mansfield before. In burlesque, we had Virginia Bell, Sally the Shape, 48 to the tape, and all these amazing hourglass sort of, they were kind of almost, I suppose they were like the film stars, right, of that time. So you could pay your 50 cents or whatever and see Jane Russell in the cinema, but then you could go and see Maria Knapp, the Jane Russell of burlesque, at your local neighborhood theater, showing you an awful lot more than Jane did in the Haystacks, and boom, you're away.
Absolutely. AJ, I know you have a question for Neil. What would you like to ask?
Yes, thank you so much, Ninon. Hi, Neil, and I love having you on. You're such a delight. I do want to say hi, Georgette. Thank you for introducing us to Neil Nez Kendall. We love him. Hi, Georgette. And
hi,
also,
Georgette.
yes, and she's our entertainment director here at NinonSpeaks. My question is about Mondo Burlesque, your upcoming book. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, absolutely. So what I was saying before about that trip to Exotic World, I felt a lot of these women from that time I've been very fortunate to interview. So everyone from Georgette, of course, Tempest Storm, Blaze Starr, Val Valentine, Bambi Brooks, so many, Tura Satana, so many of these really seminal figures of burlesque. And, in the course of my research and asking all these questions, I felt really strongly that, in their heyday, they were there to be looked at, not necessarily to be listened to. And of course, they all have incredible stories, like from dates with Elvis to backstage catfights, it's all very Jackie Collins. But there's a really great route. They're very, very earthy, very, very articulate, intelligent women. And so Mondo Burlesque came about because I just sort of felt I wanted to put all of this and capture the essence of them and put it into a book, because I think we've seen a lot of historical burlesque books, but it's a living, breathing history that's very much alive to me. So that really is the root of the book.
I think what you actually, what you're interested in is the actual burlesque dancer themselves, as to who they are and what they are, and put it into the book that these women are actually human, and they do talk, they are great, they are intelligent. And that kind of got lost because not all they did, but when they danced on the stage, that's what people saw. So they sort of think, well, they have no, because anybody in the entertainment business apparently doesn't have a brain. So a lot of people think. I mean, you know that, I know that, we all know that. But we do have brains and we do use them. But I think what you did, you gave such a presence and such a beautiful gift to these burlesque dancers of giving them this entree into their true story. How did they perceive that?
That is a good question, because I think one of the things that interested me is talking to somebody that is called a legend in their own lifetime. So, I'm thinking of someone like Tempest Storm as a great example of somebody that's sort of been incredibly famous and then not necessarily slunk into the shadows, but that is a part of her journey, her fame. So I think the answer to that is that they were really, I think, just really appreciative and happy to sort of have that discussion with someone. I mean, the one thing that always comes across, I think, with every interview I've ever done, I have yet to encounter someone in an interview where they said, oh, you know what, I only did it for the money. I hated it. I hated every moment of it. And I felt objectified. I mean, it's the opposite to that. I think for many performers, burlesque was a home and it was a family. It may have been a way out for some people because, when we think back to the 50s, the average sort of headliner was earning $3,000 or $4,000 a week.
That's a lot of money there.
So it was a significant salary back then, and and hence it was a great career choice for a lot of people. But to answer your question, I think a lot of the women just felt very encouraged that somebody was taking them seriously, that was acknowledged the work they'd done on stage, but also sort of talking to them as real human beings rather than a sex object, for example.
Yes. And what about that off stage? You know, did you get any sort of information as to how they conducted their life or how they treated their life off stage? Whenever they would go out, a lot of people would probably know who they were. And how was that? Did you ever get anything on that of that?
Yeah, it's down to personalities. You know, Evangeline, the oyster girl who worked out of New Orleans, did an act in a giant oyster shell. Kitty, the performer in real life, she would have her hair dyed Kelly green, would wear white. She would be surrounded by fans on the street, and she completely embraced that. And it goes right through to performers like Ricky Covette, who was the world's tallest exotic dancer. So she was 6'7" in her bare feet, according to her press and publicity. Wow. But she would wear a flat cap, plaid shirts, because she didn't want the male attention if she was finishing off a gig and leaving the theatre at 12 o'clock on her own at night. And then often, you know, they'd be driving city to city or state to state on what they used to call a circuit. So, you know, those jobs were, there was a kind of a safety element for them, but they were women traveling alone, you know, state to state, and they could do a whole circuit within a year. So, you know, you might start out as Ninon the Body in New York in January 1959 and gig all the year through, you know, going out to the West and then coming back again on a chain of theatres and then finish January, you know, the following year. So it was a really full on, you know, 3-4 shows a day, you know, 6 days a week. So it was a full on world for them.
I don't think any of us really realized that, right, AJ? I never realized, you know, because you think of tours now, I guess for the music business anyway, you know, there's a whole big bus and there's a lot of people and everything. Yeah. You don't think of a burlesque as a single person on stage, and all she needs is her wardrobe and herself and to get to wherever she needs to get to. Well, we don't think of that, you know, she's out and she's on her own at the same time. Anything could happen because a lot of people know who she is, but also being a burlesque dancer. I mean, wow, that was pretty risque, wasn't it? Just driving yourself.
Yeah. And this is at a time, of course, you know, we think about Vegas in the 50s, you know, there was a lot of mafia involvement, you know, so it was a kind of very film noir world to inhabit. You know, there was the flashiness, I think, of burlesque, i.e. the costumes, the look of it was, of course, very glamorous. So I think it was, of course, it was a glamorous profession, but I think certainly it was not an easy one.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. What do you think, AJ? Do you think it was an easy one? Because you've been in touch with a lot of the burlesque dancers and spoken to them. I have spoken to them, obviously, of the interview. But what is your opinion, AJ?
Yes, I agree. I think it was probably, just as you said, very, you know, they'd have to, and Ninon, that reminds me of you. You sometimes have to put, don't you have to wear a hat sometimes when you go out?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, because I have the same kind of problem. So I wear no makeup on and I dress myself in, like, I think as a camouflage, but maybe not. And then I have this hat on, but there's only one problem. It's the voice. As soon as I open my mouth and say anything else, oh, that's Ninon. So yes, you're right, AJ. It's the same type of problem, but it's not a problem because, you know, you love them all.
Yes, and also you always look cute, Ninon, whether you're wearing your hat or however you are.
You know, I paid for that, right, Neil? I gave her a couple of hundred to say that.
Yes.
I can't be bought. I can't be bought.
I can't buy her. So now, how are you? The book is out, right?
No. I am working on it. Right? Yeah. So it was. I mean, it was the perfect thing, right, for lockdown, because of course we've all spent so much time, you know, in our apartments or in our homes. So yeah, so it is a work in progress. One of several different sort of projects I'm working on at the moment. So yeah, I am hopeful later on this year I will have news for you. And in fact, all being well, I am a guest at the Viva Las Vegas competition this September. So, and I'm saying all being well for all the obvious reasons we know at the moment about international travel. So yeah, hopefully I will get to see you in person this September.
I'd love to. In fact, I'd love to have you on my other show. You know, I'm sure AJ mentioned it, but I have
she did.
Show. Yeah. Vegas Live with Ninon, and I'd love to have you on. So AJ will keep in touch with you, so we can definitely book you and get you on our show. And absolutely. Now, you slipped out a couple of words while you were talking about your book that you have other projects. What are they? What are you working on?
Literally, as of now, I'm working on this great Netflix film called Make Me a King, and I play myself in it. Yeah, it's all about amazing. It's all about drag kings. So I play like a cabaret MC in it, and we are filming this week. So I've just literally darted off the set, which we are building sort of really in my studio. So it's been a really amazing sort of time actually, because I don't know about you guys, but I sort of feel like we'd had so much time at home, and especially for creatives, and it's wonderful having Zoom and all these things, but oh my gosh, to be with the crew again, to be in that environment, right, where everything's going on around you, and you know what it's like with filming, all that frenzied cameras and the retakes, and but it's just lovely actually.
But you're actually talking to people, you're actually face to face with people. But I have to say that the pandemic did not interfere with my life at all. Number one, because of the pandemic, AJ and I got this show together on Zoom because of that. So we created this show a year ago. So we've been doing this for actually a year and a month now, but we've been doing this for quite some time, and it's actually helped us. But I did my show since June year ago. I started back on my show. So I did not let anything interfere with my life. I still went out. I did the things I did. Touch wood, I'm healthy, I think. Yeah. I've never had a COVID test actually.
Wow.
No, I've never had one, but I did have the vaccine because I was going to go to England for some personal reasons, and then I couldn't go because you've got this big 10-day lockdown.
Yeah.
From America, you have to stay in the hotel at the airport for 10 days. After 5 days, they'll test you, but it was a performance. So anyway, I love the idea of you having this, putting this Netflix thing. Now, how did you get involved with Netflix?
I have this crazy Instagram account, and it has just grown and grown and grown and grown. So I did that. There's a lovely, I can tell you now, because it's sort of, but it was a hush hush project, but I was offered this Marvel film doing sort of design and things on it. And then of course, COVID hit. And they relocated. They were going to film it down in Pinewood here in the UK, and then studios where they did.
Pinewood closed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they relocated the whole thing to LA, and I was like, oh, isn't this typical that these opportunities sort of came along? But actually, as you're saying about the show, I just think lots of the creative things have come our way during lockdown. I think it's just made us all conduct our sort of work lives in different ways, hasn't it? So that came through Instagram, which was great.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's kind of woken us all up as to find a different direction to do what we want to do. And if we can't do it this way, because we're all creative people, so if we can't do it that way, then we'll go and do it this way. So nothing's going to stop us from doing, like you've written your book, you're doing this Netflix thing, you're going to be coming to Vegas. So, you have really not been locked down, Neil. You have continued. Neil Kendall is amazing.
If you were saying that to me on Christmas Day, where I had a burnt turkey for one person, and, then that was a different story. I'd be wagging my finger over the screen at you right now. But no, I mean, seriously, I mean, in the heart of it. In fact, I'll tell you this really quickly, because I know we don't have too much time, but I had the most insane introduction to COVID, in that I was traveling for no other reason than pleasure throughout South America. And I mean, I giggle now, but it wasn't funny. I actually got stuck in Peru in a military lockdown and had to get a repatriation flight home to England. And let me tell you, Ninon, it was like, you see those, I don't know, those zombie films, where everyone's trying to get out, and everywhere
they go, they're
abandoned, and there were literally restaurants. So the Peruvian Prime Minister said at 12 o'clock midnight tonight, I had been in Machu Picchu this day. I mean, it's so dramatic, but he was like, 12 o'clock tonight, the whole borders are closing. And if you're here and you're not a national, then you will be staying here and you'll be detained indefinitely, to quote him. So you can imagine, can't you? Just thousands of miles from home in Peru, which sounds like it could be great fun, but under military lockdown, we weren't allowed to leave the hotel. You know, we couldn't.
The military lockdown is a little different than somebody saying you're going to stay in your house.
Yeah, no,
I think you've got to obey whatever they say. You've got to do.
Oh yeah. I mean,
otherwise you could
South
be
American
locked in prison. I know Peru. Peru is very, very dangerous. I actually did a documentary there, and it's very, very dangerous. You don't take any jewelry with you. You don't take anything with you because you could be robbed. And Peru is very different. It's a very sad place, actually, for some of the people that live there. Very sad. I did a documentary on the younger generation, and oh, that was a disaster. But now let's get back to you. So what have you got coming up, apart from coming to Vegas and your book? What else have you, and also Netflix? What else is happening in your beautiful life?
So I know this is a lovely little project, and this is going to sound really bizarre because we're July, but the minute I finish my film, I go into whole production in my studio, and this is such a lovely thing. I create these Halloween movie sets. So last year I built this wonderful, like a Universal Studio Frankenstein's laboratory, and I kept a parade of starlets, of brides of Frankensteins, of glamour ghouls, we call them. So they're like super glamorous women, like wearing bat wings and things. So I have to do this in August because by the time we've done the edits and everything, it's then September, and then it's October, and then I do these really, thank goodness, this will be the first production work I do, but I'm all out of kilter, right? So then I'm doing Christmas in November, and then finally, and this is really lovely, I get to produce my shows again. I have my own company, Goldust, so we haven't done a live show for 2 years, and it's just felt, you know how it's been, it's just felt with a live audience. Yeah, we've had so many backtrack things here with what we can do, and then of course the rules change, so it hasn't even been worth making the commitment to it. But come the fall, come sort of September time, I will be really excited to be to be creating new work.
Well, if I'm in England at any time, I'm going to come and visit you. But I want to go back to Halloween, and the reason being, we do not celebrate Halloween in England.
No, it's
Guy Fawkes Day.
Yeah, we have Guy Fawkes, November the 5th.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The last decade, and I know this because of all the people that come to the gigs, Halloween, for whatever reason, has exploded, and it's become a much, much bigger thing. So honestly, the show that I do this year, it's Drag Me to Hell, because we've got all these incredible sort of drag artists and things.
Pun intended.
Totally intended. But the audience are amazing. They all get dressed up. I do these really fun shows, like we did the Garden of Eden, and we had someone come dressed as a snake, and their partner was dressed as a giant apple. So we had all these kind of like whimsical shows, and then we did a trip to the moon where people came as like astronauts and rockets and things, and all the acts were like, and they were inspired by the signs of the zodiac, right? So the 12 signs of the zodiac. So with my creative brain, I love kind of cooking up all these really, really eccentric fun shows and things, because the audience, it's just amazing what they come up with. And it's that funny thing of we all want to get dressed up and have that really great night out, right? Where we're kind of in a really great, and burlesque is great for that, and cabaret, you know.
Wonderful. Now, we don't have much time, so how can anybody reach you, Neil?
I always say that the thing that I'm most on top of is Instagram, which is Neil Kendall on my Instagram. And so people send me messages or make little comments on my work, that I always get to see those.
Yes, absolutely wonderful. Well, I want to thank our audience out there for tuning in. It's been an amazing opening book of what you're doing, Neil. It's nice to reach out to the burlesque arena, because they don't really get much publicity, and I think they deserve it for what they do. But what I love that it is still continuing, and we've had many of the burlesque performers on our show, and they still continue to perform. They still, even the younger people are still, you know, they've got classes, right, AJ?
Yes.
You went to a couple of classes or lessons, didn't you, to find out how to? I didn't know if you were doing this for your husband or whether you were doing it just for entertainment.
Confidence, but thank you to Neil Kendall and all the wonderful burlesque stars out there. Thank you so much.
They are wonderful. What message would you like to give, Neil, to all the burlesque dancers out there and their tribulations and what they've done and how they've given so much to the world? What would you like to say to them?
Oh, keep on trucking, keep on creating, keep on making your art, and keep on making new art as well.